All right, welcome everyone to the February 17th City of Mebane Planning Board meeting. First thing on our agenda is the approval of the January 13th meeting minutes. We got a motion to approve it. Do we have a second? Second. All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Next on the agenda is the City Council Actions Update.
Good evening. At last Monday's meeting of the City Council, they unanimously approved the conditional rezoning request for the development known as the Preserve at Mill Creek. There were a few additional conditions considered by the council and ultimately approved, and that was to include one additional floor plan for the Classic Collection, which was a voluntary architectural commitment for the portion of the development directly connecting to the existing Mill Creek subdivision, and then also the addition of a fence along this property boundary that is close to the roadway and lots for the adjacent property owner. Are there any questions for staff about this?
Okay, next on the agenda is a request to rezone plus or minus 58.87 acres of property located at 968 North 5th Street and a plus or minus 1.23 acres of the unaddressed adjacent property on North 1st Street from R8 O&I and R8 CD to R8 CD to allow for a planned unit development consisting of 192 townhomes, 36 single-family homes, and plus or minus 15,000 square feet of commercial retail space by Matt Kirkpatrick, Reliant Partners.
As mentioned before you is a conditional rezoning request by Matt Kirkpatrick. The site totals approximately 60 acres and is along North 1st Street. It is currently zoned primarily R8, which is a residential district, O&I, which is office institutional, and then a small portion associated with the adjacent Potter's Mill development is zoned R8CD. The request is to rezone to R8 conditional district to allow for the planned unit development referenced with the introduction to this item. It should be noted that this property and the surrounding properties are located within an overlay district, which is the general watershed area. This is the protected area of the Grand Mebane Lake, also known as Back Creek watershed. The surrounding zoning, as shown here, is primarily R8 that is adjacent to the site. We have had recent approvals and development in this area, so you'll see the R8 conditional district across the street. That is the North 1st Street townhome development, which is by a similar project team that you'll see this evening. And then we have Potter's Mill R8CD to the south and the recently approved Preserve at Mill Creek to the east. There's other residential zoning in the area, including R12 and R20. Most of the site is located within the Mebane extraterritorial jurisdiction. You can see it highlighted there. It's also fairly obvious when looking at a map of our city limits. It's in the northern part of Mebane, and there is the portion of the adjacent property that's already within our city limits. The site is located in Alamance County, and city utilities are available to serve the development. As shown here, it is largely a forested site. There is a single-family home with associated structures on the property, and this is an outdated aerial imagery. Of course, if you're driving on North 1st Street, you'll see a lot of red dirt where the North 1st Street townhomes has been approved, and also here where Potter's Mill is under construction. The golf course for the Mill Creek development is nearby, as are single-family detached lots. The site is located within a mixed-use growth strategy area as identified by Mebane by Design, our comprehensive land development plan. This area is primarily focused because of the recent construction of the bypass and the easy ability to get to places in Mebane and also to the interstate. It supports, as its name indicates, a mix of uses, including commercial and residential. There is conservation area identified on the site. If you read our comprehensive land development plan, you'll note that conservation area is determined according to contiguous forest cover and also where stream buffer is located. As a conditional zoning request, a site-specific plan does carry with the zoning district, and that site plan is included in your packet and shown here on the screen. The proposal is for a planned unit development, which by the development standards in the Unified Development Ordinance requires a conditional zoning district. It includes 192 townhomes, 36 single-family detached homes, and approximately 15,000 square feet of office and retail space. Within the residential component, you'll see a number of private recreational amenities, including pocket parks, a multi-purpose field, natural trails through the open space area, and a pool and playground amenity. There's approximately 23 acres of open space, and most of the open space is areas that are being conserved. So you'll see existing tree coverage here and around here where the floodplain and neighboring sites are. In terms of public recreation, this is a similar setup as has been considered for the developments I mentioned that are adjacent, including the Preserve at Mill Creek, North First Street Townhomes, and Potter's Mill. This development will be contributing to the multi-use path network that is emerging in the area, including a bridge crossing here that would connect to Potter's Mill, and then the multi-use path network along North First Street. There are specific conditions associated with the site-specific plan, including reduced side setbacks for the townhomes and also the single-family detached lots, a reduced perimeter setback between the non-residential section here and the adjacent property. That does include an enhanced buffer. There's also a restriction of the non-residential uses that will be allowed on that property. And then the site plan shows a 50-foot streetscape, which is wider than what would typically be required. A traffic impact analysis was completed for this development as required by local ordinance and also the North Carolina Department of Transportation. Both the city and the NCDOT reviewed the prepared traffic impact analysis, and the developer is required to install turn lanes at the southern entrance, which is the primarily residential area, a roundabout at the northern entrance, and that construction would be in coordination with the developer of Preserve at Mill Creek that you heard last month. And then there are also internal protected stem links that apply to both of those driveways along North First Street. And what that means is we don't want cars backing out into North First Street as they're making turn movements into the development. So it prohibits driveways and parking areas within a certain number of feet of the connection to North First Street. Are there any questions for me at this time?
Yeah, I've got a couple questions. First, on the on sort of the high level site plans, there's this needle-shaped salient to the south, which I gather is the creek. It's but it doesn't appear on any of the plans here. Like, is this part of the property or what's going on with that?
Are you referring
Big
to
spike, yeah, right
that
there.
area? Yeah, so staff has reviewed a recombination plat for a portion of the adjacent Potter's Mill. So that's the approximately 1.23 acres that's mentioned in the agenda item description. It is primarily because the property is in the watershed. There are built upon area restrictions. So the ability to increase the acreage of a development allows for additional built upon area. There would be no real development or change in what was proposed with Potter's Mill or this one. It would be area left undisturbed outside of the pedestrian bridge for multi-use path network.
So just so I'm clear, that that part that's the stream, it was originally part of Potter's Mill. It's either has been or is contemplating being transferred to this parcel, and the purpose of the transfer is to increase the overall acreage of the parcel, which then that factors into a formula for how much they can use. Is that right?
Yes, as a development within the protected watershed, they're limited to 30% built upon area for the whole site. Outside of, well, there's a little more complication with the non-residential component, but for the residential, it's 30%.
Okay. And then the second question I had is, what do you know about the history of the site? I was interested to see that this is already zoned as R8 and O and I, which I infer means that somebody planned something before now.
I'm unaware of any immediate history. I've had a proposal for North Mebane Village in front of me within the first 6 months of me beginning here 5 years ago. So that's as far back as I go with the history of the zoning. Are there any other questions? Okay, well, I will turn it over to the applicant.
Good evening. Madam Chair, members of the planning board. My name is Tony Tate. I'm a landscape architect and land planner with TMT LA Associates. Our address is 5011 South Park Drive in Durham. I'm here tonight representing Matt Kirkpatrick, the developer for this case. Also have with me some representatives from the DRB group who are proposed to be the builders for this property. And also have Andrew Stocks here, who is our civil engineer. He'll be able to answer all the hard questions for us. So, Ashley went through a great presentation on where the project is and so forth. It's obviously on the north side of town, the east side of 119, between Potter's Mill and the preserve, just south of the entrance to Mill Creek. I think she also noted that the North First Street Towns project that is to the west of us across 119 is also a project that we did and got approved. And so that one is also the DRB group. So she mentioned it was the same group. And so it is the same group, same engineer, same planner, same developer, same builder. So we have a lot of confidence in the area and what we're proposing here. As Ashley mentioned, this project was in the planning stages for quite a while under a different developer. And their proposal was a larger, more intense mixed use property. And when we kind of took over the site, we had extensive meetings with the staff and some council, and kind of got the commentary back that it was a little more mixed use. They didn't think that what they were proposing was going to be effective here in this site. And so we went through multiple design scenarios with them and us and trying to come up with something that we felt like would meet everybody's needs. The mixed use plan is, or the comprehensive plan is for mixed use development, and even suggests that it's a higher intensity development that takes advantage of a more cluster oriented type development, which basically leaves more in open space than it does in typical scenario with smaller lots. And so again, we feel like we've achieved that. We have probably I think about 23 acres of private open space out of the basically 60 acre development. So it's basically a little over a third of the site is undeveloped. We are proposing 192 townhomes, 36 single family residential, and a maximum of 15,000 of non-residential uses, which would be neighborhood oriented service type uses like a coffee shop or a yoga studio or daycare, of things like that that would benefit the local neighbors there. Ashley also mentioned the conditional use nature of what we're proposing, in that we've got a couple variances from, not variances, but deviations from the UDO that are less than the UDO. And one of them is the setbacks between townhomes, and it's the same standard that we used across the street. The side yards, the buildings are the same distance apart that they would be with the standard setbacks. But what we've done is we've put open space in between there as a way to help maintenance, to be able to maintain the total property, because all the townhomes will be completely maintained by the HOA. So they're no closer together than they would have been. It's just the fact that we've got some open space in there. the things that we are providing that are above the UDO is that there's a list of uses for the non-residential that we've restricted so that a general use, you can't just put anything in there. So there's some restrictions on uses. Is that better? Restrictions on uses, that things that we would not want to go in there that would be allowed typically in a B2 zoning. We've got street trees, which I think is a real plus. I think we need to work on Mebane, getting them in the street where they're street trees and then yard trees, but that's for further discussion. Ashley mentioned that the buffer along 119 is increased to 50 feet from 30. We're trying to save some existing significant vegetation along the road, so it's not just a planted buffer. We've got some existing trees that separate those units there. We've got mulch trails. Let me move forward. We got the mulch trails that go throughout the open areas. There's some here. There's some down in this zone. Those will link up to the multi-use path that comes down through there. And that particular site right there is about 8 acres. So it's not a small area. It'd be a nice place for kids to get out there and walk and play and make trails and climb trees and all those good kinds of things. So got that in there. The swimming pool and amenity club got located here, and that will be available to the residents of North First Street as well, since the developer and builder are the same. So we got that located there. This particular design may not be the final design, but the commitment is to build a facility that has at least that size pool and cabana and playground and parking and all associated with it. So that will come in with the CDs. We've got pocket parks located around the neighborhood. Got one right here at this entrance, kind of buffering at the entrance. We've got this large green space here, which is larger than a football field. To kind of give you the scale, I think it's 180 feet wide by almost a little over 400 feet in this direction. That's a large space for, you try to locate those around townhomes where people don't have their own yard space to be able to get out and throw a frisbee or football or baseball or whatever. So that's a significant area there of green space. We are completing a significant portion of the multi-use path. It'll link in with the preserve path here. It will link in with a bridge that goes across and goes up through Potter's Mill, which will take you back to Stagecoach, which eventually leads you back into downtown. So that critical link there is the one that's going to help, along with the preserve from there up, is to get people from downtown to the park, the Cates Mill Park there. It'd be a continuous link there. So one more thing about the design. We've located product or homes and tried to keep them off of these two main linkages that are important for the preserve to get back out to 119, this one here, and then this one as well. So if you see on this one, we don't have any homes facing on that street. So it's going to eliminate congestion as cars approach that intersection. On this one, we only have these units right here that face that street, and everything else faces an internal street. And that also does another thing for, as far as design goes, is, you know, it mixes up the product where you don't have just long straight rows of townhomes without a break. So we've got units that face different directions. It'll keep it from feeling so linear, I guess is the right word. So that'll help. And then we have the single family homes on the outskirts here back towards the creek. And then as we tie into the preserve here, we have single family homes there. So feel like that we've satisfied a lot of what the comprehensive plan is calling for with a limited mixed use with those neighborhood uses, green space, the walking ability for all different types of trails, whether it's the multi-use trail or natural trails, the private open space. And so we feel like we've hit on all those topics. And then I guess lastly, we held a neighborhood meeting at the Mebane Arts Center and didn't have any attendance there. So happy to answer any questions that you have. And I think there's maybe some neighbors here tonight that were asked them answer their questions as well. So if we have any questions of me or the development team, we're happy to answer those for you.
Any questions from the board right now?
I have one quick, the townhomes, are they sold properties or rented properties
They are for sale.
for sale?
Yes.
And the ones across the street, those are also in the Mebane North, those are going to be rented those are going to be rented, right? Is that what they?
Those are for sale.
Or for sale.
I think those are for sale too, yeah.
Yeah. I want to point out one thing on the architecture while we got that up here. This building here is what's going to be the interior units, and these are 20 feet wide. On the end of each building will be one of the wider 26-foot wide units like you see in this photo. So this end unit would be on an end cap for this one. So
All of them are two-story with bedrooms upstairs.
Yes, sir. That's correct.
Are you doing 2 or 3 bedroom units?
I believe the townhomes are 2 bedroom.
Jackson,
Yeah, I should
up
probably
here,
say that.
yeah, introduce
Sorry.
yourself.
Yeah. Please state your name and address for the record.
Jackson McConnell. I'm with DRB Group 1101 Slater Road, also in Durham. So the townhome units are 2 bedroom units, both upstairs, as well as our single family unit, which is a 30-foot product, so a smaller type. One thing that's exciting about this, at least for myself, is that covering a 20-foot wide townhome as well as a 26-foot wide on the end unit, you're getting variety in your townhomes there, which is very nice to have 2 different product lines in a townhome building. So it breaks up the monotony of having a single building looking the same. We also like to articulate our buildings 1 to 2 feet front and back, so there's variety there. And we also like to break them vertically as well, 1 to 2 feet, so you don't have a single mass roof line. So that helps it make it look very nice as well. So I'm very excited that this community has 3 different product types coming into it, for a variety of different kind of buyers coming into the area. So
All of the townhomes have a 1-car garage.
the interior units, the 20-foot is a 1-car garage. The exterior units on the end are a 2-car garage.
Okay.
One thing about, since we do have some units that are single-car garage, we wanted to make sure we also had some additional parking in the neighborhood to accommodate, guests, any sort of guest parking. So there actually is, if you look at the plan, we do have an abundance of parking, one at our clubhouse, but as well, we provided some on-street parking as well in different locations to try and capture. One along that big lawn space on the north, you will see there's parking all along the outside of that for easier access for residents in the community or anyone who'd like to use that space, as well as at the clubhouse and some additional places that are a little hard to point out at this scale,
Sure.
but they're there.
But you didn't have any parking pads within the units themselves. Some of the townhome developments have parking pads for additional parking. They're able to locate between the buildings. You don't do that in this, correct?
You're talking about like a 2-car driveway, like an additional pad to the left or right of the
Yes.
unit?
Yeah.
No, not here.
Or not of the unit. It could be across from it, not attached to any unit. But that takes more land.
Yeah, it takes more impervious area, so
It
no, that
does.
isn't planned, yeah. We're pretty constricted by the 30% rule, so finding any additional space for that, like additional parking pad, is not available.
And all of your single family are 2-story bedrooms upstairs, correct?
Yes, sir, I believe
Okay.
so.
They appear to be.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I had a couple questions. First, I think there's a lot to like here. There's a lot of good density principles that I'm seeing. One thing I just want to sort of call out for community, anybody in the community who's watching. Do you guys know the term stroads? Do you know like that idea that there's so a stroad is this concept in urban design. It's a road that doesn't know if it wants to be a road or a street. So a road is something where you're trying to get cars from one place to another, and a street is something where people live, and it's typically slower and you can walk on it. And one of the big problems in the design of subdivisions and suburbs in general is you get a lot of stroads, which is something that is trying to both have people living on it fairly densely, walking, doing life activities, but also passing cars through at 35 miles an hour. It's very hard to do that. And I like the way that you've separated those two uses, that you've got roads and you've got streets. And except for that one stretch there, they don't mix. And I think that's going to be really great for the quality of life in the development. I had a couple of questions. And it's kind of alluded to on the site plan. You've got your stormwater containment ponds listed as potential. Can you explain that?
The potential doesn't necessarily mean like they will be built there. It's just the sizing has yet to be determined.
Okay.
And so what that means is as we go into CDs and have full grading plans and everything, those will be finalized and set exactly. as it
Okay.
should be.
So
These are the
there's
locations.
definitely three, like four, I guess.
4 if you include the commercial space to the north.
Yeah. Okay. So there's definitely four of them. They just may not be exactly that square footage that you've got here.
Yes, sir.
Okay. The setback waivers you're requesting, you explained the reason for doing it on the attached, which I thought was a good idea. You're requesting 6-foot setbacks on the detached. When I'm looking at the detached, there's several, like it's a pretty wide range of the actual lot sizes. You've got this kind of row of 6 here that are sort of the minimum size, and everybody else is like slightly larger. Can you talk about, do you expect that how prevalent would that minimum setback actually be for those detached houses?
So the reason for the variation on that is again attached to the impervious area restriction. Making lots wider increases the length of road on it, which increases the amount of impervious area on the space. We also wanted to make sure, kind of talking about clustering a little bit, is so we wanted to make sure that we keep kind of the uses in a similar location. So you want your single families together, your townhomes together. So in order to keep them all kind of as close as we could, not in a way like that, but to keep, when you're going down a street, you want to see single families. So in order to do that, that's what kind of led to that restriction in that area. So that was kind of the thinking behind that.
Okay. And then my last question is regarding the First Street roundabout. So I did see your note on the site plan, which I'm just gonna read for the benefit of anybody who's here. So it says, a development agreement is being prepared between the developers, which I assume that means you, and the developers of the preserve at Mill Creek that will clearly articulate who will be installing the roundabout. At this time, the agreement has not been finalized. I recognize that, you guys are kind of in an unlucky position to be sort of the last in line before this has to get built, and you're right here at the roundabout. What I don't want is for you guys to get into a situation of sort of hot potato where everybody is saying like, I thought it was their job, I thought it was their job. What kind of assurances can you give the city that by hook or by crook, somehow this roundabout is going to be constructed?
So that is a good point. The developer agreement in question is one with Lennar, who is doing the preserve at Mill Creek. So we are working through figuring out exactly how that language for just the shared cross of how that road's going to be done. I know they went through council approval, I want to say 2 weeks ago, maybe it was last week, I'm not sure the exact day. And I believe the restriction they have is their 101st CO before that road has to be completed. I only know that because I watched the meeting before I came here.
Right.
So that is the agreement there. I see this as something similar to an assurance could be made that the funds that go to this, whenever we get bids exactly how that road is going to be constructed. And how much that is going to cost, is that the money from both developers could go to an escrow account for those funds in order to handle that. That's something that does need to be settled through the developer agreement with them. I'll say our development is phased at the moment, so we don't have the need for that road as soon as I believe how that's turning out. So that red phase line he's trying to outline on the smaller screen, you might be able to see it vaguely on there. It's a little difficult to see. But the southern half of the development, we're following the sewer. So sewer comes from the south. So the first phase of our development comes below that red line. The second half is where that roundabout and everything would need to be constructed. So we wouldn't need to construct that road for the first half of our development until later down the line. Now, how that goes is really just whoever's the need to build that road first is who's going to end up constructing it. But the cost of it will be shared between the two.
Yeah, I mean, I understand like that everybody's trying to do the right thing. I'm trying to figure out if there's, how can the city minimize its downside risk? Because your phase one doesn't require it, and neither does Preserve at Mill Creek. They're all going to start by coming in through 9th Street, if I recall correctly.
Yeah.
And this, these build outs are going to take years. So my concern is that we're going to get to like 3 years out, 5 years out, and everybody's going to be like, weren't they going to do the roundabout? It couldn't have been us. And I'm just concerned that we're going to end up in that situation.
I do want to clarify the condition associated with the preserve at Mill Creek. So it is the number of lots to be platted, not COs. So that does make a difference. They're only allowed to plat 100 lots before a requirement comes into play for North First Street. So they can either, if DRB has built out that southern connection, then that's great for the preserve. They can begin platting, but before they can, they have to bond the road and the roundabout. So there is that financial guarantee that we would be collecting before preserve hit more than 100 lots platted.
She's a lot better at that than I am.
He's paid to do it.
I've got a question about the open space down to the south where you've got the walking trail. Is that going to be maintained, the larger one? Is that going to be maintained with the existing tree cover that is there as much as you can?
It would remain tree, and then the natural path would wind in and out of those natural vegetation. It would remain wooded.
And talk a little bit about this reduced, the reduced buffer along the non-residential use.
Yeah, so there's a requirement. My little pointer's going wonky. So there's a requirement in the UDO that non-residential uses are required 150-foot setback from the perimeter line adjacent to residential. Did I say that correctly, Ashley? So,
Yes, it is just the setback, not the landscape buffer.
Okay.
right. So, the previous plan that that was being reviewed at the time that we were told was within a couple of weeks of TRC approval, actually had a convenience store located here. And so we basically kept the same setbacks or buffers. Well, our buffers might be larger than theirs, but they had a convenience store here and some other, I believe, commercial up here. So we kind of held on to the same somewhat scenario with the non-residential portion up here. And so we're asking for that same relief, basically that they were 150 feet wouldn't allow any commercial in that triangle.
And that is just, it looks like there's just one lot that's not a part of another development at this point that's adjacent to that.
There's about a 2-acre parcel that's right in here. I believe that's the one you're talking about.
Yes.
Has a little access that runs out to 119. That is Mr. Kirkpatrick reached out to him, trying to get some commentary from him. And so I'm not sure what he plans to do with it, but it's a 2-acre, plus or minus 2-acre piece right there. that you're referring to, I believe. And we've added more evergreens in that buffer to try to mitigate that request or that setback reduction.
Are you planning to add any type of fencing or just the landscape buffer?
Currently, just the buffer, I believe.
Any other questions from the board at this point? All right, while we are not a public hearing, we do welcome questions and comments from the public. So if anyone has anything they would like to say or have questions they'd like to ask, you're welcome to come to the front. Please state your name and address for the record.
Becky Cason, 101 East Laramie Drive. My question is this the same developer that's developing across First Street where everything is, the park is there and all the things are stubbed out, but no houses have been built? Is this
Yes, ma'am, it is the same developer. And do you have a question for him? He
I
could come
was
up
just
and,
wondering what's the holdup there, and if we're not building those houses, why do we need these?
okay. I'm sure he could come up and address that question.
So I actually had that conversation earlier today. We're currently pursuing building permits on that property. I believe they're in review when I asked at the moment. So they're currently being reviewed by the city. Once those are approved, then we will move forward with, actual construction at that location, hopefully soon, because I'd love to see those go up.
Okay,
So,
thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Gary Lynn's Saddle Club Road. I like it. I've been talking about higher density for 25 years, and it's good to see we're moving that direction. And also a few amenities that you can walk to instead of having to get in your car and drive to. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? I do have one more question that might even be for staff. In the traffic impact analysis, do they do much review of pedestrian foot traffic? I know they've said that their amenities will be shared with the neighborhood, with the townhome development across the street, which gives me some concern about kids crossing that portion of 119 to get to the pool and to get to, to the other amenities. So does DOT consider foot traffic in any of their analysis?
The DOT tends to defer to the city for multimodal planning. So if you look at their review letter, there's always the same paragraph at the end. But we've had a conversation with an engineer who works for Mebane and for Graham about, is there a way to determine a generation of the number of pedestrians? I'm not sure that there is. They were working on a different project in Graham about that. So we will have multimodal considerations included within a traffic impact analysis, but it's not necessarily considering the number of pedestrian trips that would be generated with the development.
And I know the speed limit has been lowered to 35 in that section now, but I also know that most people are not adhering to that based on my personal experience driving that section.
Yeah.
So maybe the roundabout, once that's in place, will help slow people down a little bit. But
I was going to say, it's hard to go 55 through a roundabout.
yes, it is. So hopefully that will help. Yes.
Hey, good evening. My name's Andrew Stocks, 1809 Rolling Acres Drive, for the civil engineering company, for the representing the development. There was a lot of consideration going into the project across the street and conversation that was had about the DOT providing or approving the plans for a high visibility crosswalk that will be associated with that roundabout. So that was one of the actual requirements of the development across the street, that a high vis crosswalk be put in, which will now be connected to through the roundabout with this project.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any other questions from the board, or do we have a motion?
Make a motion to approve the R8 CD zoning as presented. Motion to find that the application is consistent with the objectives and goals in the city's 2017 Comprehensive Land Development Plan, Mebane by Design. Specifically, the request is for a property within the city's G3 mixed-use growth area and proposes a planned unit development that incorporates commercial and residential uses while preserving green space, encourages a mix of uses in a walkable environment consistent with growth management goal, provides greenway and open space connectivity between different land uses consistent with open space and natural resource protection goal, supports parks, greenway, and open space expansion in developed and developing areas, prioritizing connectivity between each location consistent with open space and natural resource protection goal 4.3, contributes to an emerging pedestrian and bicycle network as required by the city's bicycle and pedestrian transportation plan.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, this will be presented at the next city council meeting on
March 3rd.
March 3rd. Thank you very much. All right, announcements?
Yes, just a few quick announcements. So the meet and greet with our new city manager is scheduled for tomorrow. We have our next public forum for the comprehensive land development plan update next Thursday, February 27th. Both of these events are at the Mebane Arts and Community Center. And then your next meeting is scheduled for March 10th. We do have a quick turnaround with a delay in the February schedule.
Do you know, are we, because of the quick turnaround, do you know, have we got some on the agenda or?
We are expecting
Okay.
a rezoning, yes.
All right, anything else? No. All right, we are adjourned.